Ferrari is on its way to Las Vegas, but in Maranello they are working heavily on Project 678, which is the Ferrari for 2026, and piece by piece it is taking shape and is a completely different project from the SF25. In today's video we are going to see what direction Ferrari is taking for next year, what the drivers' opinions are on the 2026 project. Let's hear the opinions of former drivers and engineers like Aldo Costa, Damon Hill, Claire Williams, and finally, we must see a very heavy statement from Zack Brown about Christian Horner and also about Max Verstappen and his behavior on the track. Before we begin, please leave a supportive like, and now let's see everything in detail. It's not an evolution, it's a total restart. The first chassis of the 678 has passed the static tests, and within a few weeks the front crash test will arrive at CSI. But the interesting point is another. Ferrari has decided to definitively close the pull road chapter. In 2026, they return to the push road, both front and rear, but with a key innovation. Ferrari seems to have adopted a solution that McLaren had already boldly introduced 2 years ago. Indeed, it's a detail that changes everything, namely the steering, which is moved behind the lower triangle. It's not a return to the past, it's a lateral leap. According to internal rumors, the steering arm will be moved behind the lower triangle, exactly as McLaren did on the MCL39 and as Mercedes then copied. It's a solution that complicates packaging and internal grouping, but opens up a world in aerodynamics. Tondi and Sanchez are working on that philosophy to free up flows, obtain a cleaner and more stable front end. With that choice, McLaren built part of its advantage. At the rear, the situation is even more significant. Ferrari is abandoning the modified rear pull rod suspension, which was introduced in Belgium and was supposed, at least in theory, to save the season. It didn't. Instead, it worsened the balance, and even Mercedes, which had tried a similar philosophy before Ferrari, went back. In Maranello, they would have done the same, but the budget cap froze everything. For 2026, they cannot afford compromises. Everything will change, also because the gearbox case will have to be redesigned. In fact, the switch to the rear push rod requires a completely redesigned gearbox case. The internal parts of the suspension are moved higher compared to the SF25, and this opens two challenges. The first is the weight. In fact, Ferrari must remove kg everywhere to reach the famous limit of 768 kilograms. And the second point is stiffness. The box must remain very light, but without losing torsional stiffness. They are looking for new, hybrid, smart materials. No extremism, no crazy ideas. A much more McLaren philosophy, fewer risky subtleties, more project consistency. The main focus is active aerodynamics and drag resistance. In fact, the 2026 regulations will completely change the driving of Formula 1 cars. There will be movable wings front and rear, thermal and hybrid engines with the same power, new batteries, including fuel ones, but most importantly, the power unit will not be able to guarantee full maximum charge on the straight. Translated, whoever has less drag will have a huge advantage. And here Ferrari wants to start from a simple concept. No extremisms. A car that penetrates the air well, without weak points. It may not be the most extreme, but it will be consistent. Dera said it clearly. The 678 is not born to be a laboratory. It is born to be a 100% integrated project, without packaging compromises like the SF25. Because the SF25 was a structural compromise. The 2025 car was designed with very compact radiating masses to reduce bulk. Excellent on fast circuits, but a disaster on slow and hot ones. The cooling slits greatly dirted the flows. The 678 must avoid those mistakes, and everything must be consistent. Suspensions, bodywork, gearbox, aerodynamics, batteries, weight distribution. The regulation says minus 30 kilograms compared to ground effect cars, but the power unit adds 30. The result is that 60 kilos less are needed than before. It's madness considering that the 2026 tires will be lighter, but they aren't enough to compensate. In short, Ferrari's philosophy for 2026 remains stability before brilliance. In the first year of a revolutionary regulation, those who take too much risk crash, those who are conservative win. The 678 wants to be this. A car without holes, without structural weaknesses, with clean balance. A car that is born with architecture to evolve, not to correct. Ferrari wants a project that always works everywhere and allows performance development without chasing desperate solutions mid-season. The keyword is consistency. The 678 will be a completely new puzzle, but finally built all in the same direction. And yes, it is fundamental for next year to have a predictable car that works on the track and meets simulator expectations. Not that it goes on track and you have to correct the ride height, as happened, for example, this year starting from the Chinese Grand Prix, where they realized that the Ferrari with the right ride height was consuming too much of the plank. A predictable car is needed that does what you analyzed in the wind tunnel at the CFD, not a car in continuous correction. And therefore, on this point, I absolutely agree with Zera. But be careful not to have a car that's too conservative, because others will innovate. We remember Mercedes in 2014. It was a car that gave a minute advantage to opponent. In short, you also need to be innovative in this new regulatory era. Surely, those with less drag will have a huge advantage, using less battery, less energy, and thus saving some energy to use later in the rest of the circuit. And pay attention to the weight distribution, which will be crucial in the new cars, because there will be a completely redesigned engine. But let's see what Hamilton and Leclerc think about the 2026 car. The 2025 season proved it mercilessly. Ferrari was not ready to fight for the championship. The excitement of Hamilton's arrival clashed with an SF25 that was too fragile, too sensitive, and too unpredictable. The tight balance, the ridiculous aerodynamic window, a pace that disappeared from one session to the next, a season that effectively erased the initial expectations. But 2026 is a different story. There's a new regulation, rewritten aerodynamics, a power unit that's 50% thermal and 50% electric. In short, a total reset. And for Ferrari, this is not an opportunity, it's the last chance to catch up with Red Bull and McLaren. And in Maranello, they know it very well. For months, they've been working on a completely new single-seater, designed without the limits that held back the SF24 and SF25. And it's from the simulator that the most significant signals are coming. Hamilton and Leclerc are said to have endorsed the 2026 car. According to several internal sources, the latest version of the SF26 project convinced both drivers during the simulator sessions. We're not talking about a mere improvement. We're talking about a more stable response entering corners, a more predictable rear end, a much wider aerodynamic window, and consistent behavior tire by tire. Things that were practically never seen on the SF25. Leclerc, who a few months ago couldn't get a feel for the new regulation simulation, now reportedly gave the opposite feedback. The single-seater finally seems logical. Hamilton, for his part, reportedly appreciated the way the car reacts to load changes, the way it communicates to the driver what it's doing. And this is a fundamental detail. In recent years, Ferrari had produced cars that hid their limitations until it was too late. The new 2026 car seems much more transparent, much more honest with the driver. This doesn't mean Ferrari will be the favorite in 2026, especially since many voices indicate Mercedes as the team better prepared for the new regulation. But it does mean that Ferrari is there and is finally developing a single-seater that seems to work in the hands of its drivers. The feeling is that Ferrari has learned the lesson. It was no longer enough to correct a wrong foundation. A total restart was needed, and at least from the early data, this restart looks much more like a leap forward than a simple reset. 2026 will be the year when we'll find out if the Hamilton-Leclerc era has a real future or will remain an unfulfilled promise. For now, a clear signal is coming from the simulator. The 2026 Ferrari is liked by those who will have to push it to the limit. But beware that for 2026, having just a competitive car won't be enough. Others are also developing a lot on their single-seaters for next year, and we don't know the level of the opponents. But one thing is certain. It's extremely important to have both drivers at 100%. And Aldo Costa warns Ferrari. Hamilton needs to feel like a hero within the team. The SF25 never gave him what he needed. Stability, confidence, and that feeling of being part of a perfect mechanism. And most importantly, it didn't allow him to drive as he knows how. In short, Hamilton's 2025 season was very different from what he and Ferrari expected. The real test will come in 2026, when Hamilton will have to take a decisive turn and prove that he is not declining. He's simply been trapped in the wrong single-seater. But to achieve this, Ferrari will have to put him in conditions where he's always given his best. And this is where Aldo Costa comes into play, the former technical director of Ferrari and one of the architects of the dominant Mercedes. He knows Hamilton better than anyone in Maranello, and his analysis is very clear. Speaking at the Ferrari club Abbiate Grasso, Aldo Costa explained a simple thing. Hamilton works well when he feels like the absolute point of reference for the team. Lewis is a true Englishman, says Costa. He has always worked in England like me, who as an Italian had never worked abroad. The first few months must have been very tough for him. New mechanisms, new people, a new culture. And on top of that, chasing competitiveness with a car that didn't help him. Then comes the central part of the discussion. Hamilton needs a small group of people he can totally trust. His race engineer, the technical director, and the chief designer. A core that works with him, not around him. Aldo Costa is very clear. Lewis needs to feel that these people are pushing for him to win. He must be the team's standard bearer. If he doesn't feel that position, he loses some performance. He likes the idea of being the hero with the whole team behind him. And this analysis opens a huge point on the 2025 season. Hamilton arrived in an environment where the teammate wasn't just anyone, but Charles Leclerc, the driver raised in Ferrari, loved by the team, and perfectly integrated into the structure. Lewis found himself in a place where he wasn't the central figure. And for Costa, this might have limited him. And I absolutely agree with Aldo Costa's words. Hamilton needs to be the hero of the team. He has always been that at Mercedes, praised by Toto Wolff, alongside teammates who are not always considered second drivers, thinking of Nico Rosberg, even though he fought for the title with Hamilton, but Hamilton was always the favorite, or even Valtteri Bottas, up to George Russell himself, who is a daunting figure for Hamilton at Mercedes. And Lewis found himself in a place where he was no longer the central figure at Ferrari. And for Aldo Costa, this may have limited him. The message for Ferrari is not even too hidden. If you want the real Hamilton, you have to build around him an ecosystem that makes him feel the team is behind him, stimulate him, follow him, give him stable points. Mercedes did it, and it worked very well. Now there's only one question. Will Ferrari be able to create for Hamilton that psychological and technical context that Aldo Costa considers essential in 2026? Because if so, then 2025 will be remembered only as a transitional chapter. If not, the risk is that Hamilton remains always halfway through his potential. And also pay attention to Claire Williams' words, who said her piece on Lewis Hamilton and said very important things. When a driver changes teams after many years, it takes time. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But if there is one who can make such a move work, that is Lewis Hamilton. Claire Williams recalls something fundamental. Hamilton hasn't just gone from Mercedes to Ferrari. He's also moved to a completely different culture. Indirectly, Claire Williams agrees with Aldo Costa and is a reliable figure. One who has lived decades of Formula One at the highest levels and has made a very clear reasoning. Changing teams at this point in a career is much more difficult than one might think. Mercedes was his home, he built an era there, he shaped the team as he wanted, he worked with the same group for years. In Maranello instead, he found a new Italian emotional environment with a huge weight from the fanbase. And most of all, he found Charles Leclerc, a driver who has known the team for a lifetime and who has clearly beaten him in the standings this season. In all this, Hamilton ended up in the middle of a Ferrari that often didn't work even for Leclerc. In Baku, he crashed with that Pinto, destroying the floor. In Brazil, the red one came out with 0 points amidst accidents and irreparable damage. Despite everything, Claire Williams urges calm. Hamilton should not be judged now. The real test will come in 2026, when everything changes. Chassis, aerodynamics, power unit, and driving style and philosophy of the cars. Formula One that starts from scratch, and that will probably appeal more to Lewis Hamilton, because the 7-time world champion himself has always judged this era of ground effect cars poorly. Simply put, he needs to be given time, said Claire Williams. It's too early to say that the choice didn't work. Great revolutions often reveal those who can truly adapt. And if there's anyone who can succeed, it's Lewis. Ferrari, Hamilton, and Leclerc know that this will be the decisive season, the season in which Hamilton can prove whether 2025 was just a painful transition or the price to pay to get where he wanted to be since childhood. Trying to win in red, 2026 is their chance, and according to Claire Williams, Hamilton is still the right man to do it. And note that there are those who are also positive about Hamilton's arrival at Ferrari. In fact, Francesco Cigarini has said that Hamilton can be the Schumacher 2.0 of Ferrari, arriving at a new team where he has to acclimate. Schumacher himself faced this challenge, and after several years managed to win with the red car and win several titles, becoming the most titled driver in history. In fact, Francesco Cigarini, who was there when Ferrari was winning everything, a mechanic in the Schumacher era, within the team that built the most dominant car in modern history, the F2004. The comparison he's making carries a lot of weight. Cigarini starts from a concept that is well known in Maranello. The relationship between driver and team can change the history of a team. It's what happened with Schumacher and Jean Todt. Total trust, clear roles, and everyone in the same direction. And that is exactly what, according to him, needs to be recreated with Hamilton. Hamilton brings the mentality and organization of English teams, says Cigarini. Ferrari did well to take him, but now what matters is how much they will listen to him. If he suggests a direction and isn't followed because Leclerc is faster, then it becomes a vicious circle. And here the jab is direct. If Hamilton feels he doesn't have a voice in the development of the car, he automatically exits the process. If he exits the process, the team loses know-how. And if the team loses know-how, the car doesn't improve. This is the vicious circle that Cigarini sees on the horizon. For Cigarini, the point is not to minimize Leclerc, who is having one of his best seasons. In fact, he reiterates that the Monegasque is very fast and knows how to drive an unstable single-seater, as if walking on eggshells. But this is precisely why listening to Hamilton can also benefit Leclerc. Hamilton needs a solid, predictable, well-grounded car. And if you build a Ferrari with that philosophy, Leclerc, who has already adapted to everything, could take advantage of it even better. In short, the team would have a double advantage. Then there's the big issue of 2026 with the new regulations. It's a huge opportunity to rebuild everything from scratch, as happened 20 years ago. Hamilton, even though he's no longer in his absolute prime, knows perfectly well what it takes to create a dominant team. He has experienced the Mercedes structure from the inside, has helped shape it, and that knowledge doesn't disappear. Zack Brown states it clearly. I would give total trust to Lewis, even if today the stopwatch doesn't reward him. And he adds that this could be his last historical contribution to Formula One. And this is very interesting because for Zack Brown, Hamilton could form a winning Ferrari for the future. So not only in the era of Lewis winning in Ferrari, but also in the subsequent drivers who arrive in an ecosystem already formed by a 7-time world champion with a team that has shaped his mentality to win. For now, the 2025 season is pushing Hamilton to the brink of frustration, but for many, including Zack Brown, the real game is played in 2026. If Ferrari listens to him, Hamilton can really become the Schumacher of the new decade. If they don't listen to him, they risk turning this era into another huge missed opportunity, as happened with Vettel in the past and also with Alonso himself. The words we heard from John Elk and have destabilized the environment, and Damon Hill himself, former Formula One driver, said that these words further destabilize an already fragile environment. We recall the recent nightmare at Interlagos with Ferrari's double retirement, with Leclerc being blameless, rear-ended by Kimi Antonelli, who in turn was hit by Piastri and forced to retire the Monegasque. And Hamilton retired after damaging the undercarriage multiple times. And Damon Hill said he was surprised by John Elkan's words, saying it's normal for drivers to comment on the problems of the car, and they haven't said anything scandalous. They are part of the team and are the end users of the car they drive. It's normal that they don't say everything is fine when things actually and really aren't. So Damon Hill himself sides with the drivers and said that Ferrari this year has been too full of ups and downs, and it's a context that any driver finds exhausting. And especially since Ferrari is an environment full of pressure due to the history it has for the fans who want a winning Ferrari. Again, it's important not to stress the drivers, not judge them, but protect them. And John Elkan's words have destabilized an already fragile environment. On the contrary, the president of Ferrari should have defended his own drivers. And note that media management is becoming an obstacle for Ferrari instead of a resource. But let's hear Zack Brown's words on Christian Horner because he was very harsh. Zack Brown decides to settle some scores and does so by pointing the finger at Christian Horner, his longtime rival, who was let go by Red Bull after an explosive mix of disappointing results and off-track controversies. Brown can no longer beat him directly on the track, but off the track he doesn't hold back. According to him, Drive to Survive has changed Horner, turning him into a character more inclined to unfairness. I've known Christian for more than 30 years, Brown told The Telegraph. He's done incredible things, hats off to him, but he has changed. I think the fame from Drive to Survive, the money, the glory have become too much. Then comes the hardest blow. Sometimes Horner doesn't play fair. Zack Brown explains the comparison with the world of drivers. There's those who slightly push you out to let you know you need to back off, and then there's those who throw you out directly. According to him, Horner belongs to the second category and cites an example well remembered in the paddock. The infamous accusation of water in McLaren's tires at Interlagos 2024. A story never proven and, according to Brown, had only one goal: create chaos, disturb, and make noise. For McLaren's CEO, that move had neither a technical nor logical basis. It was just a gratuitous attempt to destabilize the team. The interesting thing is that Brown doesn't speak only out of personal rivalry. He speaks as someone who has witnessed McLaren rising from difficult years while seeing Horner's Red Bull celebrating titles. Now that roles are reversing, Brown wants to say out loud what he's been thinking for a long time. McLaren today is the third pole that has detached from the other two. Red Bull is going through a deep crisis. Horner is no longer there, and Zack Brown has already won the second constructors title with McLaren, one in 2024 and one in 2025. And now he has put an uncomfortable truth on the table. Christian Horner has changed and hasn't always played clean. Such a harsh statement at such a delicate moment for Red Bull is a clear signal. The verbal war between McLaren and Red Bull has just begun. And if we want, Zack Brown hasn't even been nice towards Max Verstappen, accusing the Dutch driver of being too unfair. Just like his former team principal, and that Verstappen often goes too far. It's not a casual comment. Zack Brown knows Verstappen's level well. For world titles, monstrous speed, and an ability to intimidate anyone in a duel. But according to him, there's a limit that Max exceeds too often. And among the drivers who have paid for it, Zack Brown specifically cites Lewis Hamilton. I don't want to disrespect Max, he's a 4-time world champion, Zack Brown told The Telegraph, but he's a person who's too arrogant, one who goes too far. And it's a heavy thing, especially from a team principal who is fighting against him for the 2025 title. Zack Brown isn't talking about a single episode. According to him, Verstappen has crossed the line on several occasions. And when they ask him for a precise example, the response is immediate. In Brazil against Hamilton, several times. The mind immediately goes to the most well-known episodes, Interlagos 2021, when the two went wide at turn 4, the contact the following year and many dirty duels at the limit between the two, especially in the hottest phase of their rivalry. It's not only Zack Brown who has noticed this. Adrian Newey, who was at Red Bull during those years, also admitted that Verstappen in 2021 was on the brink of a penalty in Brazil and that the pressure of the World Championship made him even more aggressive. He himself had said that after Silverstone, Max had become even tougher, taking that rivalry to an almost personal level. According to Zack Brown, this aggression is the trait that separates champions from super champions, but also what can make them make mistakes. Many of the greatest have a bit of arrogance, he says, but Max sometimes goes beyond that. And with McLaren, which is now really competing for the World Championship, these words are not just a comment, they are a message. A limit that, according to Zack Brown, Verstappen has surpassed precisely against Hamilton. And it's a significant detail. Two different eras, two different teams, but the tension between the two continues even at a distance. By now, McLaren has won the 2025 World Championship, the Constructors' title, and Norris seems to have won the Drivers' title. At most, Piastri wins it. So Zack Brown's verbal attack comes at a time when McLaren has won everything and is aware of the strength it has at this moment. Let me know in the comments your opinion on all the topics we've covered in the video. I'm curious to read and respond to all your comments. As always, I remind you to leave a like, subscribe, and activate notifications so you don't miss any videos on the channel. That's all from Rastro. See you in the next video.